He says that you are too weak to bear the massive power of the ring.
The Lantern's premiere incited a lot of mixed feelings within me. We waited 10 years to see Green Lantern on the screen again, and now that we have our first ever live-action TV show on the Space Cop, they go ahead and kill off Hal Jordan himself. I mean, this is clearly a plot device, right? Well, we have no way of figuring out the answer to that question until the episodes keep unfolding the mystery. However, HBO did drop a new Lanterns trailer to give us an idea of what this season would look like. It has been pretty evident that we have not seen the last of Hal yet, especially because Lanterns will continue jumping across different timelines while giving us the lay of the land. So until next weekend arrives to give us some answers, let's discuss 15 details that you might have missed in the Weeks Ahead trailer for Lanterns. The stakes are clearly going to be overstimulatingly high and intense. As you know, the pilot episode of Lanterns took about 10 minutes to establish that Rushville, Nebraska will pretty much be the heart of the show. In fact, the episode ended with a 10-year time jump and John finding Hal's lifeless body from the same football field that Hal kept coming back to all these years. Now that the new trailer has been teasing some rather intense developments coming our way, we see how Hal declares that an extremely dangerous being now knows that someone has discovered his presence. This footage also reveals that the Lanterns must track down a hidden Manhunter within a strict 48-hour window. We also see how the partnership between Hal and John faces some very serious issues throughout the trailer. Hal is very clear about the fact that nobody could take his ring while he still breathes. Meanwhile, John struggles to determine whether Hal actually deserves his loyalty, especially because others keep pushing him to abandon the mission. There's just a lot happening here, which makes it all the more easy for the eye to miss out on the more nuanced details. But one thing is for sure, Lanterns is much more than a classic whodunit, with a superhero twist or a quest to find Hal's ring so that John can finally take over. The trailer also makes it clear that while Hal's influence will linger across the show, this is actually John Stewart's chance to prove his mettle as the latest Green Lantern. Hal Jordan will try to figure out the reason behind the growing number of alien dead bodies. So the first thing we see in the Lanterns Weeks Ahead trailer is Hal sitting in the bleachers of the stadium where the mass shooting took place. I guess that really is his spot till the very end. Anyway, with Waylon Sanders dead, the investigation has hit a dead end, so Hal has no other option but to return to the scene in order to see if he can find anything that the cops might have missed. We see him walk across the field, looking over the spots where the visiting fans were found, hoping something might jog his memory or reveal a new clue. Now, John was initially skeptical about Waylon being an alien, but after Waylon blows himself up inside the sheriff's station, he finally accepts that Hal was right. The 4 victims who died were indeed aliens, or at least had some connection to them. John clearly wants to move faster though and keeps pushing Hal to take the case more seriously. Hal, however, tells him to unclench before reminding him that they will not get anywhere by rushing ahead of the evidence, which means they need to let the clues come to them. Patience truly is a virtue, but Hal has been long enough on the job to know that. But sadly, patience clearly is not John's strong suit. He already went after Waylon despite Hal and Carrie tracking him, which suggests that John has a tendency to act first and think later. I think it could be an interesting part of his character arc if the series shows him gradually learning to slow down, trusting the process, and avoid jumping into situations before he fully understands them. In fact, we actually get a small glimpse of that more measured side of John when he reunites with Carrie in 2026. Hal Jordan is clearly not ready to give up on being the Green Lantern yet. As we see in the first episode, despite being a seasoned hero, Hal is reckless, cynical, sarcastic, unserious, intense, territorial, and just bitter. He is clearly feeling like that one corporate employee being pushed into early retirement by the company, but has to train the replacement before walking out. There is a scene in the season trailer where Hal barges into City Hall while Carrie is addressing the citizens of Rushville. We also see William, Billy, and Zoe present inside, and they are presumably discussing the mass shooting. Once Hal enters, everyone turns to look at him as he asks if they are talking about him. Funnily enough, this perfectly fits the image Hal likes to project of himself as an arrogant guy who thinks he should be the center of attention. But the trailer's narration gives us a glimpse of what is really going on underneath that attitude, with Hal admitting that he feels like everyone simply wants him gone. That sort of lines up with what Carrie tells John about Hal actually being a very lonely person. His arrogance may be less about the confidence he exudes and more about the way he hides how isolated he actually feels. The fact that he can simultaneously believe everyone is obsessed with him and desperately want people to care about him says a lot about his complicated personality. Having said that, Carrie mentions in the trailer that she is worried the city is about to explode for no good reason, thus suggesting that Hal and John's presence may be making the situation even worse. Having a Green Lantern investigating a strange mass shooting in a small town is bound to attract attention, and it seems like the locals would rather have Hal and John leave so the sheriff's department can handle things quietly. That idea is reinforced by the shot of Hal standing in front of what appears to be a burning car, so it is fully possible that someone has tried to scare him out of Rushville or even attacked him outright, but if anything, that seems to convince Hal that he needs to stay. There is apparently an interplanetary war criminal hiding out in Rushville. So there is a scene in the latest Lanterns trailer where John, Carrie, and Hal are seen sitting in a bar while talking about the possibility of an interplanetary war criminal hiding in the city. I think the conversation is actually referring to Antan. There are several descriptions circulating online that have identified Antan as an extraterrestrial criminal who is looking for revenge against the people who wronged his species. If that is actually accurate, it would explain why he appears to have his own gang. The trailer briefly shows what seems to be his crew inside a diner that has been completely trashed, suggesting that Antan and his followers are not exactly coming to Rushville to preach the idea of peace. Given that Antan is a character created specifically for the show, DC has officially described him as an extraterrestrial criminal who is devoted to exposing the truth. He also has an intense hatred of the law and wants to deliver justice on his own terms. As of now, the biggest fan theory is that the fact that Antan might actually be Atrocitus due to the striking similarities between their description. In the comics, Atrocitus, whose original name is Atros, is an alien from Sector 666, whose people were almost completely wiped out by the Manhunters, the guardians of the universe's original robotic peacekeepers. Atrocitus was the only one who survived, and ever since then he became consumed by rage and hatred toward the Guardians. That eventually leads him to becoming the founder of the Red Lantern Corps, whose rings are powered by rage rather than the Green Lantern's willpower, and that is why the description of Antan is raising so many eyebrows. Moreover, we cannot ignore how Lanterns have been heavily teasing Manhunter-related mythology. The Manhunters were responsible for the massacre that destroyed Atrocitus' people in the comics, so if Antan's story involves his people being victims of some ancient Green Lantern or Manhunter atrocity, the show could be taking the basic Atrocitus origin and rebuilding it for the DCU. William Macon is hiding something big. In the trailer, when Hal shows up at William's ranch, the latter points out how there are already 4 dead aliens in Rushville. Yet Hal is still hanging around town. It is hard to tell whether William is basically asking him to leave or whether he is frustrated that Hal is not moving fast enough with the investigation. Either way, Hal clearly does not trust him and accuses William of hiding something on the ranch, which suggests that he knows there is much more going on than William is letting on. That accusation is followed by shots of Hal and John inside some kind of heavily secured facility filled with weapons. Some of them look like ordinary human firearms, but others look far too advanced to have been manufactured on Earth. John even points out that they do not look like they are from around here. Now at this point, the obvious question is this facility actually on William's ranch? We already know William has armed his men with AR-15s, and considering how strongly he seems to hate aliens, it is difficult to imagine him willingly working with another extraterrestrial species to prepare for whatever is coming to Rushville. However, there is another possibility. We know that Argus has access to some pretty advanced alien-looking technology, so maybe William has connections to the organization. For those who do not know, Argus is headquartered in Evergreen, Washington, which would technically make those weapons not from around here, especially if they were supplied to William from elsewhere. Of course, that is assuming Argus is even involved. Another explanation could be that William had been collecting alien tech himself. Perhaps he recovered some of these weapons from an extraterrestrial crash, possibly even from an alien other than Abin Sur, and has been using the technology to protect his ranch and prepare for whatever is coming to Rushville. If that truly is the case, the weapons could be one of the biggest clues to what William has really been up to. Antan will blackmail Hal into doing his bidding. At one point in the Weeks Ahead trailer, Antan can be heard saying that the most dangerous species in existence now knows that Earthlings are aware of them. He then gives John exactly 48 hours to identify someone or something called the Manhunter. That is when things get even more interesting because something appears to be implanted in John's head. It could be some kind of explosive device, which would presumably go off if John fails to complete the task. Ironically, you should note that Antan seems genuinely concerned about innocent people being killed. If that is really the case, then it could be a sign that he probably is not the main villain of the series. If Antan were working with Wayland and was responsible for the deaths in Rushville, why would he suddenly need John's help? And more importantly, why target a prospective Green Lantern rather than Hal himself? We also see Hal stealing a body from the morgue, so it is totally possible that he and John have split up to investigate different leads. Moreover, Antan and his gang may have been keeping tabs on both of them. Going after Hal would obviously be much harder, which makes John the easier target. Antan may know that John can't solve the mystery on his own, but if John is in danger, Hal is hardly going to sit back and do nothing. Then, we get a glimpse of this strange glowing device that looks almost like a futuristic CCTV camera. What exactly is it monitoring, and why does Hal need to steal a body? My guess is that Hal uses his ring to disable whatever surveillance system is watching the morgue before getting access to one of the alien corpses. He could then perform a proper examination of the body, looking for clues about where these aliens came from, what killed them, and most importantly, who they're actually up against. Either way, Antan is surely going to be putting him up to some mission at the behest of John's life, and I don't see how this may end well for either of them. The Manhunters are definitely the main threat that Hal has to deal with. So when it comes to the Manhunter reference in the Weeks Ahead trailer, there are a few different ways to interpret it. The most obvious possibility is that Antan is talking about the Manhunters, who were the robotic peacekeepers originally created by the Guardians of the Universe. The Guardians eventually dismantled them after these androids became hostile toward organic life and carried out a mass massacre to eradicate them from existence. But some Manhunters survived and swore to seek vengeance against their creators. In all trailers related to Lanterns, this group of villainous androids are being set up as one of the main threats for the season. So, if those survivors have made their way to Earth, they could potentially be targeting Hal, John, and even Guy because they are members of the Green Lantern Corps, which was the better organization that was created to replace the Manhunters. Now, in the comics, the Manhunters cannot shapeshift, but from what we see in the trailers, the show's depiction of these androids surely have shape-shifting abilities. In the comics, the most famous Manhunter who can shapeshift is, of course, Martian Manhunter John Jones. While his origin story has changed over the years, the basic idea has still remained relatively consistent, where John is one of the last survivors of his species and ends up on Earth after being brought here by the scientist Saul Airedale. Since Lanterns is already making plenty of changes to establish DC lore, it is entirely possible that the DCU could give John a very different history. Maybe humanity was responsible for wiping out his people, leaving John and other Martian survivors with a reason to come to Earth seeking revenge. Then there is a third possibility of the Manhunter mantle itself. As you know, DC has had several characters take on the name over the years, including Dan Richards, Paul Kirk, Mark Shaw, Chase Lawler, Kirk DePaul, and Kate Spencer. So perhaps the biggest twist is that everyone assumes the Manhunter threat is extraterrestrial when it is actually completely human. The trailer does show what appears to be someone shape-shifting in front of a woman, which makes the alien theories particularly interesting. For now, I think I would lean towards the Manhunters or Martian Manhunter possibilities, but the human Manhunter theory is worth keeping in the back of our minds. If the show really wants to pull the rug out from under us, the Manhunter everyone is looking for could turn out to be something or someone far more familiar than an alien invasion. Jon Stewart has a surprise interview with a Guardian. In the trailer, John is seen having a conversation with a Guardian disguised as a human. Given that she encourages him to ask why he was chosen, this scene could have taken place roughly 2 months before the events of the 2016 timeline, when John was first approached about becoming Hal's eventual successor. John, being John, confidently says that he already knows why he was chosen. Maybe some of that confidence comes from his father, who spent his entire life trying to overcome his fear of everything around him. John clearly does not seem surprised by the idea that he could become the next Green Lantern once Hal eventually steps down. He even acknowledges that the job won't be easy, but somehow seems convinced that he can handle it. I guess those bullet shots through that apple on his head every night gave him more confidence than trauma. When the Guardian asks what he thinks about Hal, John claims that he does not really think about him at all, which is pretty clearly a lie. Considering how much Hal seems to get under his skin, John probably thinks about him constantly. But this is not a man who emotes in what could be the most important interview of his life. We also get a look at John's Lantern uniform, and interestingly, it appears to be an actual physical suit rather than something the ring generates around his body. That is a slightly unusual choice, especially given how Lantern costumes traditionally work. The Guardian then drops a pretty important detail that even if John claims he does not have much of an opinion about Hal, Hal definitely has an opinion about John. And according to Hal, John is not ready to become a Green Lantern as he is weak. I'm guessing this information will further complicate the dynamics of their relationship because John is not simply trying to prove himself to the corpse. He may also be trying to prove to Hal that he is wrong about him. John will confront Hal about the truth he learned from the Guardian. So, John is briefly seen wearing the Green Lantern ring in the footage before the trailer cuts to him and Hal making their way through a tunnel that Hal appears to be digging with a ring. My guess is that they could be heading toward that mysterious weapons facility we saw earlier in the trailer, although there is obviously no way to know for sure yet. Now, the fun part comes during one of their car rides when John tells Hal that a Guardian apparently said Hal has broken one of his vows, which could make him unworthy of being a Green Lantern. Of course, we would have to see the show in order to find out what vow he broke, but given how reckless Hal has been, I'm not very surprised. Whalen previously pointed out that Hal seems to be losing his will to live, so perhaps that is connected to it. Maybe Hal's growing disillusionment has caused him to violate one of the fundamental principles of the Corps. Who knows? We then see John and Hal inside what looks like either a locker room or a morgue. I'm leaning toward a locker room because those strange CCTV-like devices on the walls suddenly light up and begin pointing lasers at something. Whatever they are detecting, Hal immediately reacts by creating a protective green bubble around himself and John, so I think they're either being attacked or have triggered some kind of security system. There is clearly some interplanetary traveling involved for our heroes. The trailer then jumps forward to 2026 where John is sitting inside a holding cell. Guy Gardner is on the other side of the bars talking to him about the time he met Hal, then he was also behind bars. I wonder how John ended up in jail while investigating Hal's death. Did he break the law while trying to uncover truth, or has someone deliberately framed him? And more importantly, is Guy actually there to bail him out? The trailer then jumps back to 2016 when John is seen talking to Zoe about Hal. He appears concerned about him, although I'm not sure whether he is actually worried about Hal or possibly about William and everything happening in Rushville. And if you thought Lanterns was going to stay entirely grounded on Earth, think again, because the trailer gives us several glimpses of Hal and John on what appears to be another planet covered in a strange, barren landscape. John is wearing the ring when he picks up what looks like a fragment of a humanoid skull, which suggests their investigation is eventually going to take them far beyond Nebraska and potentially much deeper into the cosmic side of the Green Lantern mythology. Guy Gardner's appearance sort of breaks one core rule of Green Lantern. Because of the Superman reboot, we already know that Guy has become a Green Lantern and co-founded the Justice Gang by the present-day DCU in 2026, setting up a larger mystery of succession, especially as John was already being trained as Hal's replacement when the story began. This seemingly breaks the one rule that has been established about the Green Lanterns in the DCU, about only one space cop wearing the ring. If Hal was active as Green Lantern at the time of Superman, this would go against the idea of each sector of the galaxy only having one protector from the Corps. However, there could be an explanation for this inconsistency. At one point, the Lantern's teaser suddenly shifts into full-on action with Rushville's water tower being destroyed and Hal looking genuinely shocked. We also see John and another man tumbling out of a moving van onto the freeway while fighting over something. Meanwhile, William warns that killing a lantern could trigger a massive response. It is unclear whether he means Hal or John, especially since he previously tasked them with dealing with the alien threat. I think their investigation has uncovered something William desperately wants to keep hidden. In 2026, John activates what looks like a Green Lantern version of the bat signal, prompting Gardner to show up after their earlier meeting in jail. We also see Rushville being attacked by enormous beams from the sky, with Hal flying toward the source, suggesting the season could be building toward a major alien assault. One particularly interesting exchange was Hal telling John that the only way he will get the ring is if Hal dies. But when Hal's body is eventually discovered, the ring is nowhere to be found. So, where did it go? One possibility is that it was transferred to Guy, making him Earth's sole Green Lantern. If Guy knows John is more deserving of it, that could explain the tension between them in 2026. Finally, we see a younger Hal confronting Sinestro, while a mysterious voice warns that Hal's actions have accelerated the inevitable, which perhaps refers to the oncoming war. Hal and John are surely having a major fallout. So after escaping the morgue with the alien body, Hal is stopped by Carrie and has to scramble for an explanation. He tries to convince her that the corpse is crucial to his investigation, but Carrie clearly isn't buying it. Her frustration eventually boils over and she simply tells Hal to get out of Rushville. That makes me think Carrie knows far more about the city's darker side than she's letting on, and possibly more than William wants the Lanterns to discover. Meanwhile, Antan is seen walking toward a wall of thick black smoke while Hal appears to be nearby. He uses his ring to redirect flames from an explosion into the air, or perhaps stop a bomb from detonating right beside him. Antan later enters William's room, where those strange laser tracking devices scan his entire body, seemingly to make sure he doesn't try anything. I think despite William's hatred of aliens, he may have formed an uneasy alliance with Antan to face a larger threat. Then in 2026, Billy gets into a fight with John, which could explain why John ends up in jail. Maybe John deliberately gets himself arrested to interrogate someone, just as Hal seems to have done years earlier. We also get to see several explosions, including one at the ranch and another at the motel, possibly caused by Wayland's people. Finally, John and Hal appear to have a brutal falling out over the Green Lantern legacy. John later leaves the hospital carrying a lantern in a bag, suggesting this could be the moment their relationship breaks apart, thus potentially explaining why they don't speak for 10 years until John eventually finds Hal dead. Well, that will be my 2 cents about the new Lanterns Weeks Ahead trailer. What are your theories about Hal's death, and what do you think about the Weeks Ahead trailer? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. As always, don't forget to hit that like, share, and subscribe. A subscription is the best way to be updated on all things Lanterns. This is the V of Marvelous Videos, and I'll be seeing you in the next one.